The introduction in Animal Crossing Wild World was always really intriguing to me. Like, the game just starts and you're in the back of a taxi cab on a rainy day. You can kind of see outside the window a little bit, and the graphics are surprisingly good for a Nintendo DS game. As a kid, I was excited to play Animal Crossing Wild World and get my town and, get all of that going, but I was always really intrigued with this little introduction segment where you're kind of just put in a scene and you're just going. Like, we're obviously not at the town just yet where we will be eventually going, which always made me intrigued by the outside worlds of Animal Crossing. What happens beyond the walls of our town or beyond the scope of our island in Animal Crossing New Horizons? We know people move in from far away, and we know there's more out there. I mean, they have a road system clearly in Animal Crossing Wild World. And while the main focus of Animal Crossing is to make you feel like you are a part and attached to your town or island, what goes on beyond that? Yeah, we're looking at every single time we've gotten to explore or experience something beyond our town or island. Now, clearly, I use the taxi example because I think it was one of the more cozy, unique ways of starting an Animal Crossing game. But this idea of introducing the player in an out-of-town or city-focused introduction and then, opening the gates to let you go and see what it's like has been something that's been done in pretty much every mainline game. In the original Gamecube version of the game, you start off on a train. This is also mirrored in the Nintendo 3DS, Animal Crossing New Leaf. Also, you're on a train. But this is interesting. In the original Nintendo 64 Animal Forest Dobutsu no Mori that only released in Japan, the train ride starts off with not a lot of sunlight coming through, and you kind of just look at the window and it's, a pretty still image. There is a little bit of a lighting effect that comes in after Rover sits down, suggesting that more light is able to kind of pace its way in, but we don't know much. We just see kind of some shade of what the sky would be like, and that's about it. But in the GameCube version of Animal Crossing, this would be updated where they added this moving tree effect in the background, which really kind of makes it feel more like a real moving train ride that you're in. Kind of neat. I'm pretty sure nobody else has talked about this or has even noticed. I do think at the very beginning of the train ride, it suggests that we are going through a tunnel because in the GameCube version, it does seem much more dark. And then after Rover sits down, maybe you exit the tunnel and then we can kind of see the trees and more colors in the background. It's not super detailed, but at least we get an idea of the type of area we're going through. It's a rural train ride that we're going on. There's a lot of blue also suggesting maybe that's the ocean in the background, which would make sense because the town is connected to the ocean. So maybe this section, is close to the water where you can look out the window and see the ocean. I don't know. Of course, Wild World, my favorite, doesn't have much going on, just this cliffside texture moving in the background and some thick rainish, foggy aesthetic going on. And I think the windshield wipers really add to this experience feeling so, I don't know, cozy, ASMR-y. I don't know. It's cool. With City Folk, we don't get a whole lot of information from the windows. It seems like there are street lights, though, wherever we are, so maybe we're in a little bit more of an urban setting. Also, in both Wild World and City Folk, I find it interesting that in the backgrounds, it doesn't necessarily reflect what weather we will have in our actual town. Like, in Wild World, it's raining. There's a chance there won't be rain on your first day playing. And in City Folk, it's nighttime, but you could be playing in the middle of the day, and it'll still be nighttime in your bus ride. Quick side tangent, how do the vehicles leave the town? There's no roads or anywhere for them to go. They're just here and then they're gone. We're not going to ask any questions. And then in New Leaf, surprisingly, I can't really make out what we're driving by or riding by in a train. Maybe another train we're passing, or it could just be a building really close to train tracks. I don't know. This one's a little weird. But I'm not here just to talk about the different transportation outside worlds. They're just the first ones we experience. There's locations we actually get to go to where we leave our town and island behind. But first, we actually got a sponsor. Do you ever just want to tune everything out for a bit? Not in a dramatic way, just block out noise and focus on whatever you're doing. That's kind of why we always keep these on us. Raycon's Everyday Earbuds. They're super comfortable, they have great sound, and most importantly, they actually help us focus. Look at Luke wearing them here in this B-roll footage. They've got active noise cancellation, so we don't have to hear all the chaos that's going on around us, and whether we're working, editing, or just trying to enjoy a podcast without distractions, they make a huge difference. The battery life is insane, 32 hours total with the case. I barely even have to think about charging them, and even if I forget, a quick 10-minute charge gets me another 90 minutes of use, which is wild. You can also connect 2 devices at one time, so we can swap between laptops and phones without having to jump and mess around with settings. There's no more fumbling with the Bluetooth menus, it just works, which seriously, I I hate these Bluetooth menus sometimes. And these headphones do a great job at actually staying in, whether I'm walking, running, or just like moving around. There's no constant adjusting of the headphones, no earbuds popping out randomly, and they're sweat and water resistant, so they can handle whatever you throw at them, whether you're a heavy sweater or you're exercising. Hey, I'm not here to judge. Honestly, for the price, it's kind of wild how good they are. If you want to check them out, head to buyraycon.com/RocketElijah for 20% off. Link in the description. Now, interestingly enough, when Animal Forest was first in development for the Nintendo 64, there were plans of like bigger things that you would do in the game. It was more of like an adventure angled thing where you would, I don't know, like go in caves and fight stuff. And then obviously that all got changed to what we did end up getting. So for the most part, as far as like traveling the Animal Crossing world, the town that you get in the first generation Animal Crossing games is pretty much it. However, there is one slight thing where you do get to leave the town and look around a bit, and that is the island that you can travel to with Cap'n. I don't know, this was cool. You got to go on a little rowboat, Cap'n serenades you, and you know how that all goes. And then boom, you're on this weird island, and there's coconuts and a random villager. You could talk to the random villager, you can go inside this house here, and there's some rare clothes that you could get, and that's about it. The coconuts are cool though. You can plant them on your island by the beach, and then you get more bells for them than a regular fruit, so you have that going for you. It's about the journey, not necessarily the destination, and in first gen, this was the de facto location outside of your Animal Crossing town that you could actually go and journey to, and hey, it was something. It was cool. There was even this whole Game Boy Advance crossover thing where if you had a Game Boy Advance and a little connector adapter for the GameCube, and you didn't even need to have an actual game, just the Game Boy Advance, you plugged it in, and boom, there was like a little Animal Crossing mini game you could play, and you like tapped on trees. There wasn't too much going on, but it was something. It was something else, you know, more worldly Animal Crossing, I guess. I don't know. There wasn't a Game Boy Advance Animal Crossing game, so this was as close as anybody was going to get. The music is a little terrifying, but also cool at the same time. Take a listen. Now, technically, in the original GameCube version, it's a single-player only game. There isn't true multiplayer, simultaneous multiplayer, I guess. You could have 3 other people living in your town and you could take turns playing, but not at the same time. But you also could go and visit your friends' towns as well if they brought over their memory card and you put it in the second slot in your GameCube and traveled by train to their town. Now, this is always like one of the more surreal examples of a multiplayer experience because you're still playing by yourself. It's not multiplayer. It's single player on someone else's save. It's a whole interesting concept, but it is weird. You're like running around this town that someone else has, but they're not in the town at the time that you're there. It's how Animal Crossing was back in the earliest days, before multiplayer was fully implemented in the more simultaneous setting that we know about in newer games. But yeah, that was the only other instance of you leaving your town besides going to the island, and you got to take the train again, which was, you know, a pretty good plus. There was pretty much a guarantee if you did the whole memory card thing that one of your villagers would move to the town that you go and visit, which would be heartbreaking sometimes because back in the early days you didn't have any choice over which villagers went, but it would encourage you to go and visit that town again, to go visit your favorite villager that Kyle managed to steal from your town. But then on top of that, when you go to visit Kyle's town to go see your old villager, another one of your villagers will move there. So it's like this vicious cycle. Still, the adventure of riding on the train was something kind of unique about the first Animal Crossing game. I do wish there were other locations we could have taken the train to. I think that would have been a really cool thing, but getting to at least go to other people's towns did feel like a special treat, even if they were nowhere to actually be seen in the town, but chances were they were sitting right next to you because you were using their memory card and they had to like bring it over. How many people actually played Animal Crossing this way? I managed to. I had a couple of friends who did have Animal Crossing back in the GameCube days, maybe around 2004, 2005 I did it a few times. But then like when Wild World came out, it was a lot easier because there was online connection. You could just connect over the internet. What a cool feature. Wild World was a, you know, trimmed down version of the original Animal Crossing experience. I mean, they added a lot of new things, but some things were cut, obviously. There's no island you get to go and travel to, so that's kind of sad. The taxi cab is kind of the coolest out-of-town experience you get in Animal Crossing Wild World, outside of just going to someone else's town and visiting, with the power of the internet and community forums and chat rooms online where people would share friend codes with strangers so that you could come and visit their town. Something that would continue to go on all the way pretty much through New Horizons as well. Nonetheless, they changed the whole train system to this like gate system with like guards and stuff, and I don't know, I kind of like this. This is a weird vibe, but it's a cool vibe at the same time. Like, there's something special about going through the gate into this void color that, there's no real graphics on the other side of the door. You just kind of disappear into the light, and then you would come out somewhere else in someone else's town, and that was neat. I think multiplayer really was special for the people that did play online a lot during the Wild World days. I know there were some people who played it a lot, not everyone. A lot of people back when Wild World first came out in 2005 didn't have like Wi-Fi available yet. I mean, Wi-Fi was around, but not everyone had like a router that would work with the DS and let you connect wirelessly that way. That wasn't more commonplace until a little bit later. So I was fortunate enough to have figured that out as a kid. I found my MAC address, which was a big thing you needed sometimes to connect on the DS, and I got that all working, and I was able to play that in Mario Kart DS, and it was an exciting time. I visited a couple of friends. I had some Animal Crossing friends that I had met. I had some Pokemon friends that I had met. We talked on AIM Messenger. It was a weird time, the mid-2000s as a kid, but yeah, I don't know. Animal Crossing City Folk gets hated on a lot, but it did something cool. It was the first game to be like, hey, let's do something different outside of the main town that you get to experience, and that was, of course, well, the city. This was such a big deal and such a cool step for Animal Crossing. Sure, a lot of these services and stuff could have existed in the main town, but they decided to do something different and make this little plaza area, so it felt like you were going on a little adventure. You were like leaving your little village town behind to head into the big city and do some shopping or whatever, go to a comedy club. This game was weird. I loved the idea of the city. At the end of the day, I think I would have probably preferred to be able to build up a city in my own town. Still something I have as a bucket list for a future Animal Crossing game, but for what it accomplished here, it did it really well. And while it might not be like my biggest preference for how they could do games in the future, I don't know if I want the city to return unless they, do something like really big and different with it. I guess I'm trying to say I don't want the City Folk City to return. I like the idea of the City Folk City, and I think that it was done really, really well here, and it's like the best part of City Folk that makes going back and playing City Folk absolutely worth it. I liked that you could see random villagers just like hanging out here, even if they weren't from your town. There were different shops, you get your hair done, and more stuff would like be there after a while. There were like interesting characters you could run into, and the whole, extra aspect of, okay, yeah, you have to ride on a bus to get here. You feel like you're going on a journey somewhere. I think that was a really, really cool way to kind of put this whole idea into motion. And yeah, the City Folk City was really, really cool. The music was fire also. Listen to this. It was like you had all the experiences of Wild World with some additions, plus this big city you could go and mess around in for 15, 20 minutes a day. I think that if in a future Animal Crossing game, they wanted to bring the idea of going to a specific city back and have some cool sort of like online connectivity type aspect to it, but have it separated from the main game, it could be something that's really, really cool. I think a place where you can go and get like special seasonal items or something, maybe a different type of store that's only there sometimes, maybe something kind of like how the Nook Point system worked, where you could like get those things at the ATM, but an actual store you could go to, but you had to like journey to it, and maybe there was like a rotation of things moving, so there was always something new and different. I would love for something like that where we got to go and leave our island and do something more, like a bigger destination type place. But who knows? If that does come in the future, City Folk definitely laid the groundwork to let something like that even be possible. Animal Crossing New Leaf. What an interesting game this was. This game really aimed to be the ultimate Animal Crossing game. It took the best of all of the games before and tried to make like one very perfected and polished Animal Crossing experience where you get to be the mayor. New Leaf is often looked at as one of the best Animal Crossing games of all time, rightfully so, because there are a lot of really great locations that you can travel to. I mean, that's not the only reason New Leaf is good, but it's one of them for sure. Okay, check this out. Remember the islands from back in the GameCube days? If you've noticed, they haven't been around. They weren't around in Wild World or City Folk. Cap'n was kind of out of a job. He had to start driving a taxi, and then later he got a job driving a bus. But look, he's able to retire or whatever and go back to just, rowing a boat for people. And you could go to Cap'n's Island, and there was his whole family there, and it was a great little tiny island. Not a whole lot going on here. And honestly, unless you were hunting rare beetles or fishing, there really wasn't too much of a purpose into coming here. But those rare beetles you could catch could make you bank. So it definitely was worth coming here. So it was cool. It was like, drawing a little inspiration from that original little island you can go and travel travel to. Sure, there's not a random villager just stranded here like before, but there's like captain's families, so you can have some small dialogue with them and then get on with your day. Hey, a little island getaway from your main town in Animal Crossing. An idea that I think they would run with for Animal Crossing New Horizons. But New Leaf didn't stop there. There was, of course, the main street, which was technically still a part of the town, but it was like a street instead of a town, and you could just walk there, and it was at the top of everyone's town. This, I'm not a fan of nearly as much as the city experience, where it was a separate entity. I don't like the fact that like most of the in-town locations are just here. I know it's like the same thing as a city, but it's just a street instead. But I just feel like if it's going to already be considered a part of the town, then let me choose where things go in said town. It's fine. It's detached. It's capable and competent. But I think it would have been cooler if we could have chose to make our own main street if, we wanted to, and line up the buildings that way rather than having them all in a set location or like a randomized location like in older games and how those things were decided. But they did incorporate it into the town, which does kind of fit into the feeling of you being a mayor, right? Like if you're the mayor, you want to be able to make decisions as what happens on the street. You wouldn't, be making decisions for another city. That wouldn't make sense. So I guess it did make sense that it was all in one street, except random ones weren't on the main street for whatever reason, like the resident service, or what was it called in that? The town hall? And retail were actually in the town. Nobody really used the whole consignment system that they introduced in this game. Another unused feature of Animal Crossing. Maybe we should look into unused features that were just ignored through the years at some point. But yeah, I guess the town hall was neat. But a real step away was the whole thing going on even further north of town hall, which was the whole Happy Room Academy setup thing that they had going on here with Digby. Our boy Digby actually was important back in the day, and he gave us an interesting insight into the larger world of Animal Crossing. Now, this doesn't quite count as like another out of town area, but you're gonna see why I bring it up here. The 3DS had this thing called StreetPass, where like if you walked past someone else who had a 3DS that was transmitting StreetPass info, you would trade info, and then you can interact with them depending on what game it is. In this game specifically, their house would appear in this like little neighborhood area all the way up here, and you could essentially, save up as many houses as you passed people. I only ever had one person I street passed with back in the day, and they would be like my de facto go-to house to get to explore in the Happy Home area. But fortunately enough, they were ballers of Animal Crossing New Leaf because their house was decked out. And the benefit of passing a baller is that you can order their furniture items directly from their house, and then it gets shipped to you the next day. And that was really cool. It was a limit to 5 items a day, but if you had, passed a bunch of people, it was like you had another store just for being online. And it was a really great incentive that didn't ruin the game, but kind of gave you a whole new way to play and feel like you're connected to the larger Animal Crossing multiverse, or whatever we want to call the equivalent of these other towns that have some of the same villagers, but a different layout and a different mayor. But then that wasn't it with New Leaf. New Leaf was like a gift that just kept on giving. Eventually, they added things called Tortimer's Boat Tours, which was essentially an extra little adventure you could go on, and you could play it with friends, and there were like mini games and stuff you could do, but it was something else where you got to travel away from your main town and go on a boat tour. And then they added the whole big amiibo update stuff, which was obviously, to sell amiibo, but they added the whole RV thing, which is where you could have campers coming by, especially if you scanned amiibo, and you could try to convince them to interact with you or give you like a design or whatever. I think if you had the amiibo, you could convince them to move in even back then, which was awesome. But look, like it opened up this whole nother area that was just attached at the side of your town over in a corner here. And that was a pretty big deal. Like all of a sudden you're just playing and there's a new update 3 years after the game came out, and then there's like this area where there's more stuff to do. That's incredible. Imagine if New Horizons was still getting updates 3 or 4 years after its release. Wouldn't have that been nice? Pocket Camp obviously has like a lot of locations, as the game doesn't have like a central town. You kind of just have these small locations that you can go to. So I don't really know what to even count from this one, but as far as spin-offs are concerned, Happy Home Designer did something really cool, having like this main street area that felt very New Leaf-y in vibe, but different. It was like a real city, and you kind of think in your head, like, this is like what a city outside of a main Animal Crossing town would be like. And yeah, you could go and you can decorate these special locations and like theme them off of whatever so that the town has more amenities. And this is so cool. I love this as a concept, and I'll circle back to this more in a minute because New Horizons had Happy Home Paradise, which also did something similar. But just remember, this city is cool. That's the gist of it. Then we have Animal Crossing New Horizons, and this game, surprisingly for you being in like a desolate island getaway away from the world, you get to leave this isolation a few times. times. Much like how the old Animal Crossing games technically started you not in your town. You're on a train, you're in a cab, you're on a bus, then you're on a train again. New Horizons has you at an airport counter talking to like Timmy and Tommy. That was like big. Like, we're in the first person perspective again, like the old games, but they have air travel now. Like, this wasn't something we even knew existed in the Animal Crossing world, I'm pretty sure. Actually, the trailer to Animal Crossing New Horizons kind of showcases this whole concept a bit differently. Like, we get to see the villager looking out of the airplane, kind of really hitting that idea home. We get to see villagers watching a presentation on like the whole Nook getaway packages or whatever. So like they're in this weird auditorium room. Like, these are all off island technically. With how few examples there are of us actually getting to leave our town or our island, this is big to see a glimpse into these other locations. It might not sound exciting to you, but I think this is so interesting. Like, what do you think the lobby to this room is like outside of this, you know, getaway package timeshare type vibe that they're trying to sell to the villagers? There are a few other areas. Obviously, the whole like going to an island thing would be evolved actually quite heavily. Now there was the whole like Nook Mile tours where you got to go to a random island instead of the same island every time like you could with Tortimer before. And these islands have less people there for sure. Sometimes you could get a villager to recruit if you had an open spot. And you could find like rare fruit, and there were different types of special islands you could occasionally get to, but there was a variety of islands. So every time you left, you know, you got something, and it added a little intrigue to the whole journey outside. They did the special like Earth Day equivalent in Animal Crossing where there was like a special maze that was set up, and it was like a puzzle that you had to essentially solve to get to the end and get like the special prize. They updated it 1 year later and gave you a new maze, and then they never did it again. I loved this little update though, where they added the maze. I think that was such a great idea. They like made something special. Like they were like, hey, here's this like new event where you can go somewhere. Also, hedges are in the game. Have fun. And I think that if they would have done more little updates where it's like, hey, go fly to this special location and do a puzzle and you get an item, I think that would have prolonged Animal Crossing's like excitement even longer, because then people would have been like, hey, well, like I gotta get on to at least go on this little thing that they added and let's just see what that's about. And the puzzle was surprisingly like, I mean, not impossibly hard, but it was like challenging. It wasn't just like baby's first puzzle. It was like, you know, you got to think about it. And then I think depending on how you figured out to get through it, if you like really thought about it longer and you solved it in a certain way, you could get even more rewards than just the basic one, if I remember correctly. So that was cool too. There was also Harv's Island, which was so boring at the beginning. He would come to your island and hype it up like, dude, you got to check out my island, dude. It is insane. I got this house. And then you finally go there and it's just him and this empty house. It was cool for like taking photos or whatever. Later on, they would do an update and they added all these like little campsite things and all these little vendors that were there, which was awesome because I wanted more stores in Animal Crossing New Horizons. It felt like there was a step down from how much stuff we actually had in Animal Crossing New Leaf. So it was cool that the vendors finally showed up. I still feel like it would have been cool to be able to pick where they were in my main island rather than having to go to a separate island to access them. But hey, it was content and I was all for it. During the same time, they added the whole Cap'n tours, which essentially were just like the island tours that you could do with Nook Mile tickets, except you got to go to other types of places. That's about it. There was some new like ivy and stuff at some of those places. And I mean, they were different, so that was neat. I mean, it was good to have Cap'n back. Like, you know, whatever. Let him come back. The biggest thing though, the biggest exploration thing we've ever had was Animal Crossing Happy Home Paradise though, which was this time a DLC. So it was something very clearly off of our island. We had to fly to this other island. Essentially, it was like a bunch of islands, like a archipelago or something. And we had like a main island, like the resort area where you could like plan people's vacations. But then there was all these other buildings that you could eventually go and decorate and like, you know, give them themes, like a restaurant theme, and you could pick villagers to work at the restaurant. And I want this feature in my town where I can decorate like a restaurant and have my villagers working there so that when my friends come over, I could be like, check out this restaurant I designed. That's it. Just for the flexing purposes. But I think that is something that just needs to be moved into the main game and not be separate, but at least we had it, period. Because if we didn't have Happy Home Paradise, we just wouldn't have it at all. And then of course, you planned their vacation homes in different little islands, which all count as different places beyond our main island that we got to have. And then of course, there was Jolly Red, which barely counts. I mean, it's a boat that floats around your island, but it's technically off island. You just step on the boat. It was added. It wasn't at the beginning of the game, okay? I still think that this should count, and I kind of liked how they did it. I thought it was funny. Okay, did I miss anything? I don't think I did. If you like this type of video where we just do deep dives into really, really specific and esoteric topics that nobody else really cares about or even thinks about, make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time with a new video.